and it in a lot of very striking ways, which aren't discussed much, but they're very real. So take in the 1980s, if you take a look at what happened, it's quite striking. When Reagan came in 1981, he was facing problems. He didn't know what was going on, but the guys around him were facing problems in Central America, which were very much like what Kennedy faced in South Vietnam in 1961, very similar. And they tried to follow the Kennedy model. Kennedy was their hero, very much unlike the picture that's been created. They tried to follow in Central America the same model that Kennedy did in South Vietnam. You can see it step by step. Same white papers, communists are taking over, the whole business. The media went along totally, communists are taking over the world, and so on. But they had to back off. They had to back off because it was just too much popular opposition. A lot of it was coming from the church, a lot from popular groups and so on. So they backed off and they carried out what they call the clandestine war. That's a war which means everybody knows about it except the American population. Obviously the victims know, the participants know, and so on. But they keep it away from the population so they don't find out about it. It's called, the name for it is called the Vietnam Syndrome. And there's an effort to present it as if Americans don't want to face casualties. It's a total lie. It has nothing to do with Americans facing casualties. People, or if there's something they think of as like a just war, Second World War, it doesn't matter how many casualties there are, you do it. What they don't want to face is aggressive war. But you can't say that. You can't make that public. But there's a deep feeling that we don't want to be involved in an aggressive war. That's why they dropped the draft. The draft is a citizens' army, and they just can't get a citizens' army to fight colonial wars. That's something the British knew 200 years ago. They didn't use British soldiers, it was mercenaries, French, everyone else. But the U.S. dropped the citizens' army, and instead they have a mercenary army. It's called a volunteer army, but it's just a mercenary army of the disadvantaged. People like Lydia England, the woman who was this Abu Ghraib thing. You just look at her background, you see where they're coming from. These are really oppressed people. No education, no opportunities, nothing. When they recruit for soldiers, they don't go to Harvard Square. They go downtown to the Boston slums, where you can pick up people who figure, okay, maybe I've got a way out of this. And those kind of people you can train to become, trained killers, or you just use plain mercenaries. They're called contractors or something like that, but they're just mercenaries. The Foreign Legion. Or use special forces, like British special forces have been used as mercenaries all over the world. They're really good at kicking people in the faces around here, But that was part of it. By the time it got to the 80s, they couldn't carry out an invasion. So they used mercenary forces from Taiwan, Britain, Israel, other places, funding from Saudi Arabia. We're just organized mercenary army in Nicaragua, El Salvador, state security forces. And they did carry out a pretty hideous massacre, but it was nothing like an invasion. That's not B-52s.
You're getting signal for time.
Getting signal for time. Okay, well, last comment about this, because it's quite important and not discussed. Something completely new happened in the 1980s, new in hundreds of years of Western imperialism. There was a solidarity movement in which people actually went to live with the victims. And that's never happened. Nobody thought to go live in a Vietnamese village during the Vietnam War, or nobody from France went to live in an Algerian village. It was considered very heroic if you wrote an article in Le Monde saying, I don't want to torture or something, and then you're a big hero, and so on and so forth. But in the 1980s, literally tens of thousands of Americans went to Central America. A lot of them stayed there. Went to Argentina. But and they were mostly coming from the mainstream. One of the reasons why it's unknown is it was not happening in the elite centers. Like it wasn't happening in Canada. It was happening in churches in Kansas, Arizona, places like that. A lot of it was coming out of Christian evangelical movements, contrary to what you hear. And very serious, sincere people, very dedicated. They're just coming out of a much more civilized country. And when it gets to the global justice movement, it's just something totally new. I like it anywhere, all over the world. So yes, there's been a lot of changes, very positive ones. I mean, they're not going to be given headlines in the newspapers, of course, but they're happening. So you've never seen a group like this. Certainly not 40 years ago, even 20 years ago. And now you see all over the place. I was up in Carolina, my wife worked in northeast Brazil, in the Amazon, 6-7 years ago, I forget. And I was giving them various talks, but an anarchist group asked me to come talk northeast Brazil, in the Amazon. Pretty much like this.
And I think you're under a deadline, although we would really love to talk for hours on these subjects, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule and Mr. Hugh Carroll. So now that Irish whiskey.
Oh, fantastic.